to another smoothly. The best transition is no transition, a story so well organized that one thought follows another naturally. But if you are changing speakers or topics, you may need some of these transition techniques. Use cause and effect. If one paragraph raises a question, answer it in the next paragraph, or elaborate with an example or a quote. Try to anticipate the questions the readers might have. To make a transition from one source to another, just introduce a new source. Repetition of key words. Transition for background. To insert background, you can use words and phrases such as previously or in the past, or specific time elements such as 2 months ago, blah, blah, blah happened. Blocking sources. Do you get annoyed when you encounter a second reference to a person's last name in the story, but you have forgotten who that person is? After a person is identified by a full name once, newspaper and online sites use only the last name if the person is mentioned again in the story. If only 1 or 2 people are mentioned, this isn't confusing, but the reader will have trouble remembering sources by their last names if there's several of them. So this blocking technique helps eliminate such confusion. It is a way of organizing information by using sources in blocks instead of placing them sporadically throughout a story. Blocks as in like a paragraph. If I have person A, then I'm keeping person A in this paragraph, person B in the second paragraph, and person C in the third paragraph, rather than having A in the beginning and the end, and B over here and over there, or C over here and over there. It's like boom, boom, boom. And I really like this technique. Here's how the blocking technique works to avoid this problem. When you have 3 or more sources in a story, use each source once or in consecutive paragraphs, blocking all of his or her comments in one part of the story. If you must use a source again in another part of the story, reintroduce the person by title or some reference to remind the reader of that person's identity. The exception is like a well-known source such as the mayor, the governor, the president, or a celebrity. The name of such a source may be placed anywhere in the story without confusing the reader if it's somebody well known. Okay, making middles move. How do you maintain interest in the middle of the story? Transitions are one method, but these are other writing techniques will help keep the middles moving. Vary the pace, follow long sentences with short ones. Pacing is even more important in broadcast writing when you are writing for the ear and we are speaking the dialogue. So people have to breathe when you're speaking it. So that's why it's important too to have short sentences. If you use complex sentences, then follow them up with short, punchy ones. You can use parallel construction where the sentences are worded in the same grammatical order. Boring but important stuff. Many stories, especially government stories, need explanation or background that could be boring. Don't put all the boring information in a long block. Break it into smaller paragraphs and place it where it will fit. Also consider graphics as a way to present statistics and other information that could clog a story. Simple sentences for complex information. The more difficult the information is, the simpler your sentences should be. Use simple sentences with simple construction, especially for bureaucratic information that could be hard for the reader to comprehend. Lists. Use active voice whenever possible. Here's an example of active voice. She will always remember her first story. Here is the same sentence in passive voice. Her first story will always be remembered by her. The active voice has more of an impact. Write shorter sentences. On average, your sentences should have fewer than 25 words. Write simple sentences. Keep the subject and the verb close together. Avoid jargon. Translate bureaucratic terms into simple ones, define technical terms. Here's advice from writer George Orwell. Never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Never use a long word when a short one will do. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use the passive when you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Because remember, we want our writing to be sort of anything very conversational, something that anyone can read and understand. So keep it simple. And endings. Call them lasting impressions. To many writers, the ending is is as important as the beginning. Sometimes readers don't always get that far, but if you do, you should reward them with a memorable ending. The ending is also called the kicker. Think of it as the clincher. It should give a summary feeling to your story without repeating any information that you've stated previously. Quote kickers, these are going to be the stories that end on a quote. Circle kickers, this is when you say something at the beginning of your story and then you bring it up again at the end of your story, so you've circled back around. Future action kickers, this is where you are ending your story with a future action, so the council will vote on the issue next week. Climaxes, cliffhangers, out of gas endings. You can always just end when you have no more to say. This method is appropriate for hard news stories, particularly those structured with a summary lead and arranged with supporting points in descending order of importance. You can end on a quote, a future action, or just another fact in the story. All right, let's move on to chapter 9, story forms. So there's this really good story about the 2012 Aurora shooting in Colorado. It talks about the Denver Post's coverage that night, so definitely read this. The initial stories were written in one of the most basic forms of news writing, the inverted pyramid, in which the most important information is in the lead. Okay. The inverted pyramid form is one of the most common writing forms for breaking news, but is only one of several ways to write news. When the Philadelphia Inquirer published a series about school violence, the reporters chose a different form to tell the story of how teachers are targets of terror. The reporters wrote this story in the Wall Street Journal structure, a form that starts with an anecdotal lead, focusing on one person who exemplifies the problems of many others. Different stories lend themselves to different writing forms. The most common story structures were created for print media, but smartphones and tablets and multimedia are the new ways of telling stories. Good content and good writing are still the most important factors of any platform. So story structures, here are some basic story forms that work in print and online, adapted for mobile. Here's the inverted pyramid, the most common for print and broadcast. The story is structured with the most important information at the top, followed by supporting points in descending order of importance. Usually starts with a summary lead that gives some of the basics of who, what, when, where, and why. Summary lead, your backup quotes or facts, supporting points, and your ending. If you were watching a mystery TV show or movie, you would have to wait until the end to find out who was guilty. But with a story using the inverted pyramid, you tell the outcome in the lead. Most important stuff right at the beginning. The advantage of this form is that the reader gets the crucial information quickly. The disadvantage is that the reader may not read past the crucial information. This form is the primary structure for breaking news. It's an important form for online news. It is a way to let readers determine immediately whether they're interested in the story. The Wall Street Journal formula starts with a soft lead focusing on a person, scene, or event. The idea is to go from the specific to the general, starting with a paragraph or two about a person, place, or event that illustrates the main point of the story. The lead can be anecdotal, descriptive, or narrative. It is followed by a focus graph, the nut graph, that gives the main point of the story. This paragraph should explain what the story is about and why it is important. The story then presents backup for the lead and supporting points. The body of the story is arranged topically with one point leading to another. The ending usually comes full circle by using a quote or anecdote from the person in the lead or a future development of something mentioned in the beginning. Okay. All right.